Welcome back. The G20 Summit opens tomorrow in Germany. For more on this, we are now joined on the line by our presidential correspondent, Mzwandile Mbeje, who is in Hamburg, Germany. Mzwandile, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what are some of the key global issues that are likely to take center stage?
Thank you very much, Lulu. As you know, this is a very important summit, a summit of 19 countries plus the EU, and then that constitutes the G20. Yes, this summit is supposed to discuss about the economic issues that affect the world. But I can tell you, Lulu, that with the geopolitics taking center stage, the issue around Donald Trump. President Trump of America has made it very, very clear that his interest is to serve the people of America. That is why he appears to take an isolationist or a protectionist stance. And there is an issue again around Russia. President Putin, is actually trying to exert influence at the global stage. So you are likely to see the core issues that these leaders are supposed to be debating, and then you are really likely to see personalities really playing themselves out. But we expect a number of issues to come up. The issue of making sure that global growth really is paid attention to. The issue of making sure to get the climate change issue back into the track. You remember that a few weeks ago, the United States decided that no, it's not going to be part of the climate change deal that was ratified or rather was signed in Paris. So those are some of the issues, Lulu, that will really be seized with this conference. But we expect leaders, other than perhaps the US, to try and push for closer cooperation, because without that, the world economy really will be ailing big time.
Now, Mzwandile, many have questioned holding an event like this in a congested city centre where protests have already begun. What are the contingency plans in place? Do you have any idea? Have you managed to get that information?
Lulu, I wouldn't really say the city is too congested because it doesn't matter. This kind of event attracts huge attention, especially from activists. You know that activists would feel that this is a waste of time. They feel that the leaders need to do more in terms of action than talking. So what you have in this city is a total lockdown of the city. I can tell you, Lulu, getting here is a mission because there is security at every checkpoint. You know where top leaders are gathering, so the issues of security will be very high on the agenda. And bear in mind again, Lulu, that countries like Germany, countries like France and the UK in recent past have been really falling victims to terrorist attacks. So you would expect this kind of security, especially when you have the president of the US, the president of Russia and the president of China, and of course other presidents from around the world, and indeed President Jacob Zuma is one of them. So the issue of security is very high, and you can see it's visible. And we did have a chat with some of the people getting their feeling to say, so their city seems to be like a complete war zone without the fight as yet. So what do they feel? And then they said, you know what, they understand, given that there were issues of security in Germany recently and across Europe. But as you had said, the activists would always want to make their voices heard. That is why they try and push and come here, because what they want to send the message to leaders to say, as you are gathering there, we are sick and tired of the talk, but we want to see action on those things that you agree upon.
Now, Mzwandile, we mentioning the fact that, our aware of the fact that the different presidents like US President Donald Trump, Putin, Angela Merkel and China, and there's a lot of issues that do you think that they might likely discuss these issues, for instance, like North Korea and everything that's happening there in terms of missile launches, and the issue within the Gulf area where the Gulf region, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, there seems to be some sort of instability that's taking place there. Are we likely, do you think that will also be discussed, maybe even on the sidelines, apart from issues like climate change, where we're more than likely going to see the G20 coming together and maybe ganging up on the US president to try and change his mind with regards to climate change?
Lulu, as I indicated in my intro, that the geopolitics would definitely take center stage because this gathering is primarily about economic matters. But the fact of the matter is that the world is not in a stable environment. That example of North Korea you've just mentioned. Earlier we had a chat with President Jacob Zuma, who arrived as well to take part in this. He was saying they will try by all means to make sure that everyone gets to adhere to the agenda, particularly the African agenda. You know that South Africa is the sole representative from the African continent. As I said to you, you have 19 countries plus the EU, and from Africa, South Africa is the only one which is the full member. Never mind that time and again they do invite countries which had certain institutions like the AU, like the NEPAD. So given all that, Lulu, and the situation in the Middle East, in North Korea, so these leaders will definitely use that opportunity to reflect on this, because at the end of the day, for the economy to pick up pace, for the economy to grow, you need a stable environment. If, for example, Saudi Arabia, as they have decided together with the neighbors to cut ties with Qatar, that will impact heavily on the global community in terms of trade and in terms of movement. And it's the same thing in North Korea. Once there's this stability in that Korean peninsula, you're talking here about countries like Japan, like South Korea, and of course like China. So once you affect all those countries, so the stability will impact very negatively on the general populace. So definitely the leaders will make sure that despite making sure that they deal with the issues of economy, but the geopolitics is definitely debated, because without any stability, they might as well not talk about economics.
Now, let's take a look at South Africa. It's the only African member of the G20. What will be our key focus?
Lulu, our key focus, I think, is very clear from the discussions we've had with the representative from South Africa, particularly President Jacob Zuma. He says they are here to make sure that the issue of the African agenda is not derailed, because you have a situation where countries are progressively looking towards themselves. That is why you have an issue of Brexit, where the British are actually leaving the EU, and then you have an issue about the US, where it also says, you know what, it's America first. The president is basically saying, as South Africa, so he wants to make sure that the issue of South African interest and the African agenda remains on the table. And you must know that, Lulu, when the president attends some of this summit, it's not just to make an appearance, but it's to impress upon his peers, so that they can be impressed about bringing investment into the country. So once the country is able to get that kind of investment and the continent benefits, you know, it's become a cliche to say South Africa is a gateway to Africa. But in fact, if you look at the kind of institution that South Africa has and the stability in that country, so you can see that it becomes easier for the global community to set up base in South Africa if they want to expand their businesses into Africa. So that is what the president and his delegation will be impressing upon here, to say South Africa, despite its challenges, remains a stable and a thriving democracy. So if you come and set up base here, and then you can also have the possibility of expanding into the rest of the African continent. The African continent remains largely untapped, Lulu. So I can assure you that whoever is serious business and they want to get into the markets that are growing, so you'll definitely not ignore Africa.
Mzwandile, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll definitely be getting more updates as the G20 Summit continues. That was our presidential correspondent, Mzwandile Mbeje, in Hamburg, Germany, giving us an insight on what to expect ahead of the G20 Summit tomorrow.